Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa, the brand and partner marketing manager at Rewind. I just wanted to kick things off by thanking you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join our webinar today. And as we know, Halloween is right around the corner, so we promise to bring you a lot of tricks and treats to enjoy throughout the webinar. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Scott, who will be one of your hosts for today's session. Enjoy.
Thank you, Melissa. Really appreciate the intro. Welcome, everyone, to pain to productivity, eliminating accounting efficiency vampires. Obviously, a little bit of a Halloween theme going on here. We thought it was just that right time of the year. Our design team was feeling creative, and all these lovely decorations, can't put them to waste. So we thought we'd make it a little bit fun at the same time. All right. So today's speakers, let's just introduce everyone in the room. My name is Scott Parker. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Rewind. I work in the accounting area of things at the moment, and I've had the opportunity to speak with some amazing folks in the accounting industry recently and learned a lot, and hopefully been able to share a lot as well. And we're looking to do a bit more of that today. And with us today is Brandon Bruce. Brandon, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Bruce. Obviously going with vampires, we had to stick with bats because you've got vampire bats. I certainly presented a good argument for black cats because we're uncat. So in the chat, by the way, which should be open if you all want to say hello and introduce yourselves and where you're from. If you want to put a plug in for cats versus bats, you can weigh in on that. And we'd love to see your comments. And then I know Scott will touch on this, but throughout the webinar, if you want to put anything in chat or in the Q&A, we'd love to hear from you, right? As interactive as this can be, we'd love to answer any questions you have about Rewind and Uncat. But yeah, thanks again to echo Scott and Melissa. Thanks again for coming.
Absolutely. And with me today, of course, is Igor. He's our local product expert here at Rewind. Igor, why don't you say hello?
Hi, everyone. I'll be giving you a demo a little bit later. Until then, I'll turn it back over to Scott.
Perfect. All right. Thanks very much. All right. So let's get started. On today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about who we are for anyone who hasn't met us before, either Rewind or Uncat. We're going to talk about some accounting efficiency vampires and how to combat them. In my recent discussions with the accounting world, I've definitely heard of a lot of areas where things just suck away time and money, and there's definitely solutions to those things. And I think a lot of the digital transformation that's happening right now, especially with things like QuickBooks moving to the cloud, on my side of the fence anyway, are causing new and interesting problems. And I think we have some solutions that we can talk about for those today. And we're going to talk about solution spotlights. So we're going to have a look at two different products that can help you with some of these issues that we're seeing. And of course, we're going to do Q&A. And as Brandon mentioned, we would love for you to put questions in the Q&A section. We will try to get to all of them. We often run out of time. And if we do, we'll absolutely follow up with you after the fact. But please do put in questions as you get them. We're more than happy to answer as we go. So there should be a little option in Zoom for you at the bottom that says Q&A. Pop them in there. All right. So first, let me just introduce Rewind for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to meet us yet. We are a cloud application that backs up all of your QuickBooks Online and MailChimp if you happen to use that data. So what has happened is most people have moved online. Either you've been forced to move online, in the case of QuickBooks Online, or you've chosen to move to an online SaaS service. Most of those application providers back up their code, so the infrastructure that runs those platforms, but they don't back up your data. And unfortunately, most people don't realize this until something goes wrong. So we're seeing a lot of that lately. Rewind safeguards the SaaS data your business relies on by backing all of that information up in real time and then making it very easy to restore it when you need to. We are lucky enough to have over 100,000 customers at this point who trust us with their data, which is fantastic. I think we're probably one of the first in the space to really tackle the SaaS data problem as opposed to the more standard local problem of having data on, a local server, a local USB stick. And we've had the privilege, I think, of working with some really great partners in the QuickBooks and accounting industry to kind of learn a bit more about what's going on there and just see interesting ways that they're using backup as a solution to other problems outside of backup as well. Brandon, why don't you tell us a bit about Uncat?
Yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, we're 100% pro cat. And if I was at home right now, my cat would know to walk across my keyboard because she knows that if I'm on a Zoom, I can't really move. So it's a pretty captive audience to get petted. But UNCAT is short for uncategorized transactions. So, we help accounting professionals, accountants, and bookkeepers categorize transactions with their clients. Last year, we did more than 175,000 transactions worth almost $500 million. So the volume can sneak up on you. Most of us know that uncategorized are a problem. What you may not know is that the average client, at least that uses UNCAT, has about $10,000 US worth of uncategorized transactions per month. So it's one of those things that it can sneak up on you. So by the end of the year, it's pretty important to knock those things down so you can file taxes properly, make your budgets, have reports that make any sense. So we built UNCAT and launched it on the QuickBooks Online Marketplace about 3 years ago.
Fantastic. My cursor got away from me. Blame the cat. Here we go.
Oh, you're good. I think, the next slide was me too. So I was just saying, we work with about 15,000 firms with accountants, bookkeepers, and their clients, which use UNCAT to clean up uncategorized transactions across QuickBooks Online. We also integrate with QuickBooks Desktop using the QuickBooks Web Connector, as well as with Xero. So those are the primary platforms that we sync with.
Okay. All right. So now we know a little bit about us. Let's talk about those accounting efficiency vampires and a little bit on how to combat them. All right. So we obviously had a little bit of fun with the wording here, but every profession has its monsters. I've worked in many different companies, and every department, every industry has its own efficiency vampire. In the case of accounting, what you have told me is that some of the biggest pain points tend to be efficiency problems, and they almost always at the bottom line, draining time that results in money or money directly. So some examples that we hear pretty commonly. I'm going to categorize these into two different areas. We'll call them internal vampires and external vampires. Internal vampires being things that typically happen within your four walls, and external will be forces outside your control that act on you, your data, and your time. So, for example, I've heard a lot, integration's gone bad. What people have told me very commonly, and actually I've seen this myself, is you connect with another piece of software, another source of information, and something goes wrong. Either they push the data in incorrectly, they misformat the data. Either way, it gets pulled into your system, changes a bunch of things that you didn't anticipate it changing, or just simply throws data out of whack. And now you are kind of on the hook to walk it all back to where it came from, which is extremely time consuming, depending on how many things it touched along the way. The other thing that I hear a lot about that's kind of in the same vein is failed data imports. Whether you're importing an Excel sheet, a CSV, for example, again, wrong comma in the wrong place at the wrong time can really cause a lot of problems in a data import. And sometimes if it's a big enough data import, that can have really far-reaching consequences. And trying to get everything back to the way it was can be a real pain, consuming many hours in some cases just to get it back the way it was if you don't have a current backup or a quick way to get back. Brandon, tell us a little bit about incomplete data.
Yeah, so for that, sometimes you see transactions in your books where you don't know who the vendor was, which is a pretty natural way for a transaction to be uncategorized. First time you've done business with this vendor, and so you really don't know the origin of that expense. Same thing can happen, though, on the deposit side, especially in trades, construction. You might get a brick of cash, and it's like, well, what project is this associated with? It's just cash. And so that incomplete data can obviously make a mess of the books in terms of reporting, but certainly when it comes to tax or audit time, it's really important to know the origin of those expenses and deposits and be able to report that back to the client. So it's really a process. We focus on the process, right, of you partnering with your client to make sure you have the right information. And that starts with having the information in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. The last one there, retention and compliance. What a lot of our partners have told us in the past is they used to just simply back things up to the desktop or to a USB key using file export or what have you. And the challenge with that is you end up with either a USB key or a file source just full of stuff. And then when something does go wrong, trying to walk it back through all that file structure to figure out exactly where that piece of data went wrong to restore it can be so overwhelming that in many cases they just go back and rebuild it manually. That's not ideal. And saving things on something like a drive, those USB drives are generally cheaply made and definitely go bad pretty frequently. And then all of your information is gone. Even that, just simply remembering to do an export and keep it handy is quite a task in itself. And although I think many of us are fairly regimented, there's always that time that it slips, or you didn't do it that week, you do it monthly, and the information you needed was 3 weeks ago, and now you really have to either manually redo it or walk it back a long way and rebuild from that period forward. So either way, it tends to drain a lot of money and a lot of time. Most folks are also looking to keep data for a considerable amount of time, generally speaking, and to build up a hierarchy like that's searchable is almost impossible to do manually to make it effective. We have a pro tip at the bottom of the screen here. What seems like the easy way usually isn't, and that pertains to the thing I was just talking about. A lot of individuals, when they first come to Rewind, say, I thought what I would do is just export the data and just keep it. That seems like an easy path. Unfortunately, the reality is it often isn't, because you typically need a piece of data from 3 weeks ago, and trying to get back to figure out where that is in your pile of exports can be very time consuming and difficult, almost to the point where it doesn't really work. And that's often when people come to us, something's gone wrong and they've lost something important, and they just can't find it in the plan that they had for disaster recovery. Okay, let's talk a little bit about external vampires. So things that are outside your organization that may be acting on you. Virus and data breaches. So you've moved to the cloud. You might think that doesn't affect me anymore. I'm in the cloud. The cloud's completely protected from that. Ask Okta how they feel about that this morning. So the system that allows you to log into things should be extremely secure. Probably one of the most secure. Major data breach today. Someone got through and messed it all up, and they're definitely suffering from that today. Nothing in the cloud is 100% secure, just like things on your desktop. And unfortunately, the way a lot of things work is if they can see it or access it in the cloud, like maybe cloud storage, if they can see it and it's replicated on your system, like if there's a local copy, it will still infect it here, and then that will replicate to the cloud. So it still ends up in the cloud. You still get that virus. So there's still a lot of ways that things can go bad for your data, regardless of where it sits. And having a good backup is clearly important to that. Helpful customers. I've got quotes around this one because what you've told me in the past when I've talked to many of you is that often customers have access to the QuickBooks Online system and they will help. They will log in, they will try to make changes or adjustments on their own. They will add things in that they think are needed. And often that really causes a lot of problems for you because they'll potentially mess something up, and that could be a small problem. It could be a really big problem. Either way, it ends up being your problem. And what people have told me is that they're hesitant to charge for it because, the customer made a mistake, and even though it's going to take several hours to fix it, it's an awkward conversation, and they're just looking to avoid them. Either way, it costs time and money to go back and make the repair. So although they think they're being helpful, it really just hits your bottom line, or you're having a very awkward conversation and asking for additional money, neither of which are ideal situations. Brandon, tell me
that one, Scott, real quickly. That one was one of my favorite ones because you guys put that in there, but we certainly have heard this back from firms that we work with on the UnCat side, because occasionally a client trying to be helpful will also try to recategorize a lot of transactions, for example, or change classes or add a number of vendors, et cetera. And that can go really well if the client knows their way around QuickBooks and set up the file with you. But it can also, to your point, come back to haunt you using the Halloween theme. So it's nice to have a platform dedicated to those sort of communications, so you get to the bottom of these transactions in sort of a safe sandbox, and then you can push the information into QuickBooks in a sync. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me about unhelpful customers.
Yeah, I mean, the unhelpful customer is in our case, mostly the customer, the client that's not responding. We're not responding quickly, right? So UnCat very much exists in a help us help you. type of situation. So the client usually has specific information about transactions that will explain them, right? They went to Applebee's. We know they had food. The question is, who did they eat with and why did they have the meal? And only they know that. And so by asking them and getting that information back, we can then properly categorize the reason that we had that meal, or why did they spend $1,000 at Amazon or Costco or Home Depot, or what was this Venmo deposit? Really only the client knows these things. And so we built Uncat to expedite that type of communication. Too often we found ourselves sending emails or exporting spreadsheets and getting information and copy pasting responses back. And it took a really long time, and we're trying to close the books. And so creating a system that synced the transactions in, got the client responses faster, allowed the client to be helpful because they want to close the books properly also. They just want to focus on their business. And so we're trying to make it efficient to the overall theme of today so that they can get in, help you categorize, and then get back out and continue to grow their company.
Yeah. Awesome. I love the help us perspective on that. And I think your pro tip here kind of speaks a bit more to that.
Yeah, that's what, so we made a discovery when we first launched, which is that our most used feature by clients was, I forgot my password. And we thought that's not the business we set out to be in. We're just trying to get information back from clients about transactions that need their attention. And so we pivoted away from that. Now clients don't need to create an account. They don't have to have a password. They don't have to download an app. They don't even need to have access to the GL. They don't have to have a QuickBooks login. Instead, we send them a magic link and they click and come straight in and provide their accountant or bookkeeper with responses about transactions. So we try to approach it from the standpoint of reducing friction for the client. You're busy, they're also busy, but technology inevitably fails if you don't get engagement and adoption. So to get that engagement, we just want to make it as easy as clicking a link. That way, no matter if it's your tech savvy, I love apps clients, or it's the client that can never remember their password and rarely responds to your emails, everyone can click a link. Everyone can answer a few simple questions about a transaction. And so we want to meet clients where they are, which is extremely busy and in a rush to get you the information back. And so the magic link, as one example, has helped us to do that.
Yeah.
You're going to tell a really nice comment by Melissa in the Q&A. Love it. Thank you, Melissa. Melissa was not paid to say that, but I'm pretty tempted to hook you up with some cat swag if you're going out to QuickBooks Connect in a month.
Well, to be fair, inefficiency tends to stem from friction. So I think we're both eliminating friction in some unique ways. You're eliminating friction between our accountants and the customer. We are simply eliminating that friction within the org, just with regards to getting back to a place where things were working properly. So I love that. Okay, let me hit our next slide. So here's, I don't know if any of you are Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans out there, but my wife certainly is. And as soon as she heard about this presentation, she said, "Oh, you got to have Buffy." So there she is. And the question is, how can we slay those monsters? So great question. So from Rewind's perspective, one thing you really need to have in place to solve actually several different problems is not just about having a copy of things. Having a copy of things then solves many other problems. So easy, reliable backup is something we would want to impress. That is probably something you're going to want to look into. You want something that's set it and forget it. It's not super technical. Many of the backup solutions out there right now are somewhat complex. And if you go in the manual route, it's even more complex to some degree. So something that's quick, easy, plug it in, it just works, it's just reliable, the data is there. Real-time capture of your changes. So, you're making 1,000 changes an hour. You want to make sure that you can go back to the specific change that then caused the root of whatever problem it is you're looking to solve. So you want something that's capturing that data in your real time. You want the ability to restore entire files or specific transactions. So maybe something has corrupted an entire file or whatever reason we've lost it. That's a big problem. You want to be able to bring that whole thing back. Or maybe it's at the transactional level. Maybe there's just one thing that caused a knock-on effect and you want to go back to where that one thing happened or find that one thing and bring it back. So you want something that gives you that flexibility. You want some level of long-term retention, whether that is a retention of that customer file on whole, in part, or ideally the flexibility to have multiple ways to store it. So perhaps a copy of the full file and then an export of simplified data for future concerns like compliance with retention, legal retention requirements and that kind of thing. So you want something that's going to sort of solve all those problems at once. An interesting stat here is that over 40% of SaaS users say they've suffered data loss. So we do independent surveys once in a while. And again, this is a really common problem that is kind of below the waterline. People don't always really talk about it with SaaS products, but the reason Rewind exists is because this happens all the time. Unfortunately, we just don't hear from people until it happens most often. So we're hoping to help you get ahead of that. And then the other thing that we often hear is, doesn't SaaS kind of just do all that backup? And I alluded to that earlier. People have this misconception that these cloud products just take care of stuff. But think about each of these cloud products trying to keep all of your data, plus all of your customers' data, plus every other accounting firm's data. It incrementally just explodes as far as the amount and volume of data they would need to keep as a backup. If they're doing it daily or by the minute even, it would be untenable. So they can't. So they have this thing called shared responsibility that if you look at the fine print, you will see the layout for you. Unfortunately, most people don't notice it until it's too late. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. So as far as like the types of things that can happen to your data right now in the SaaS world and the cloud, from a very unlikely end of things, meteor lands on their server farm. Probably unlikely, but it could happen. They're responsible for that. A data breach at Intuit, they are responsible for that. That's their hardware and firewalls. We can't control that. But outside of that, third-party applications causing problems, malicious acts. Maybe you had a co-op student who got angry and just decided to delete a file or what have you. Malware and ransomware absolutely can lock those files down or cause problems within the files themselves. Bad CSV imports seem to happen more often than not lately. And human error, just plain old oops, those moments where your blood runs cold and you realize, oh, I shouldn't hit that button and something terrible has happened. Definitely more likely. Rewind covers pretty much all of that. So basically anything that's within your sphere of responsibility will take care of that. The SaaS products, unfortunately, do not cover that information. They're really just concerned with their own infrastructure. And as an example of what they call shared responsibility, this is an industry term you may or may not have heard of before. They typically have it in their T's and C's. Here's an example of it. We'll zoom right in because it's often very small. You are responsible for any lost or unrecoverable content. That is their get out of jail free card when something goes wrong. It's one little sentence and it's buried within the legalese. Like I say, people often don't see it until it's too late, which is a shame. So what is Rewind going to do for you? Well, we're going to provide you a very easy to use system that allows you to recover quickly from unwanted changes, restoring data at the transactional level. So if you want to go down to one particular transaction, you can find it and restore it from any point in time. We'll take you back to any point in time before that mistake occurred. And this can all happen within seconds. The UI is very intuitive and very easy to navigate. I've actually had people tell me it's easier to search for specific transactions in Rewind than it is in QuickBooks Online itself. I haven't vetted that myself, but that's from folks in the industry. So I was intrigued by that one. That wasn't a use case we originally built for, but it's great to know it's happening. 365-day in-app retention included. So we actually take care of the storage for you in a secure location. It's actually in AWS, Amazon, which is one of the most secure spaces you can go into. And you have the ability to export those as well. So if you want a simplified version exported to just simply keep as, for 7, 10, whatever your retention, absolutely you can do that as well. So it's a real kind of step up. If you're using a USB key external drive or anything else today, it is a significant step up from that in terms of fully automating the backup process. No configuration required. It just does it from the minute you connect back to QuickBooks, you're good to go. And then you can search and restore transactional or full file anytime. You can also do things like manage client files separately and have different access controls for each. So if you need a client to access a specific backup for whatever reason, you can do that and not see all of the other client files that you have in the system. So you can really control who can see what. Couple of quick quotes from folks that I've talked to in the past. Wonderful people gave us really glowing reviews, which I always appreciate. The thing I want to highlight here on the left is the real undo option. That is how it is described to me by customers a lot. It just feels like I can hit undo and that problem, no matter how big or small, goes away. And on the right from Lynn, I definitely feel secure. I really often hear that feedback is that this just provides that safety blanket, that security that I need to know that if something's gone wrong, no problem. I won't lose hours, I'll lose seconds. Brandon, tell us a little bit about this number 2 here.
Yeah, for sure. So some of this I've prefaced already, but what we found is, and Jennifer posted this into the Q&A, right? The non-responsive client is real, and it's counterintuitive in many respects, because this is a client that's paying you to do their books, but then they're not responding to you, which is kind of super weird. Because it's they want their books done because they're paying for it, but then they won't respond to sort of basic questions to help you help them. So, what we tried to do with Uncat is to create a very simple, user-friendly experience where they can click the magic link, come into an interface that looks familiar because it's not dissimilar from an email or a spreadsheet, and they can quickly add descriptions to transactions. They can easily add receipts, and those responses will sync into QuickBooks, and you'll also be able to see them in your Uncat dashboard and quickly categorize them, right? So when we have a chance to show, quick screens later, you'll see how simple of an app it is. You really can't get lost. What we're trying to do is get rid of a lot of back and forth. So, communication is intrinsically back and forth because it's two ways, but we don't want to go back and forth like a ping pong game. We just want to do it once. So rather, and make it automatic versus manual. So instead of at the end of the month, I need to export another report of uncategorized transactions, expenses, let's say. Oh, wait, but we also have some uncategorized deposits. And what about those assets that are also uncategorized? Okay, 3 reports. Awesome. Send them all to the client. Wait for 3 weeks. So the client never got them, or they were on their phone, and filling out a spreadsheet on the phone is very inconvenient. And so, hey, can we have a web interface that does it a lot better? And can we automatically sync that data instead of having you remember to do that across each and every one of your clients at month-end close? So to Scott's point, we try to simplify it and automate it. So we connect, like I said earlier, with hopefully your preferred accounting software. If you're on the Intuit stack, QuickBooks Online or Desktop or Xero, and then being able to sync in without the additional manual work. As few times as you have to press the on-off button, the better. So as soon as we're capturing data, it's going into the GL. That's going to always be your source of truth. And we are a conduit for that. So we're trying to expedite the communication between you and your clients. Interestingly, just like you mentioned, Scott, I've been intrigued, sometimes even surprised by certain use cases or feedback that you've gotten about Rewind, like additional benefits or advantages people have found. One of the things that I love to hear that we hadn't anticipated building Uncat, because we just want to solve this problem around uncategorized transactions, is clients were responding to their accountants saying, I really appreciate you spending more time on my company this year. And the accountants were emailing me saying, we've spent no additional time on their company this year. It's the exact same as we did last year. The difference was the client was receiving a weekly email from Uncat saying, dear client, your accounting professional Scott needs information back from you about $8,500.73 of uncategorized transactions. They're like, wow, they're really looking closely at my transactions and making sure they get it right. And so from the client perspective, they felt like it was white glove. And as a result, it had this nice brand affiliation, this nice marketing implication where they wanted to do more work with this accountant and they wanted to stay their client, which is a pretty great outcome.
Yeah, for sure. I think on the next slide, you're going to tell us a bit about more details around those. But I imagine that you've gone from pulling all that data out, kind of trying to reformat it to look pretty, sending that email, writing that email, waiting 3 weeks, getting it back, going back and forth to make changes, then ultimately putting it all back into QuickBooks is a very long process. Whereas now it's like 30 seconds of this system kind of does it. And maybe you give it a once over. But I bet it has reduced a significant amount of time while actually providing a much cleaner, faster service from the customer perspective.
And that's the idea, right? I mean, when we talk with folks, for example, in a few weeks, we'll be at QuickBooks Connect in Las Vegas, and I'll ask people when I'm at the booth, I always ask them, hey, do you have any clients with uncategorized? And everyone always laughs and smiles. It's like, of course I do. Pretty much all of my clients have them. And it's like, oh yeah, but I've been doing this for 15 years, let's say. So I just, I do an export and I send it to them. And it is a bit of a hassle we call it herding cats, chase clients for information and they get back and then I copy paste it in. But I've just sort of done it this way for a long time. And it's like, well, try Uncat. And then once they add their first client, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, I've opened up a lot of headspace to do more high value activities, right? More advisory service or just other services for clients or take on more clients. That's the big theme that we've seen over the last 3 years is it's such a strong industry right now. It's not even necessarily about just saving time for your existing clients. It's opening up time so you can take on more clients because it's such an expanding industry. And so that's been fun to see is the firms that we work with continuing to add, more and more clients to their firms.
Yeah. And it's not just an accounting industry focus. Looking for repetitive tasks of any kind and finding a way to automate them is 100% the right way to free yourself up for more important strategic or customer focused activity. It's just some industries don't have an IT team sitting next to them to figure out how to automate all this stuff. So when it comes to things like backups or uncategorized transactions, hopefully we can provide that IT backup to eliminate those things. So you can focus on things that will actually grow the business. I'm just going to pop into your next slide there. So why don't you take us through the details?
Yeah. This is a quick high level. So you can imagine essentially, and we always recommend a weekly notification. So uncategorized transactions will automatically flow from the accounting software into Uncat. You don't have to press a button. It just, once you've set it up once, it's just the little engine that it runs in the background. And so on a weekly cadence, we're going to notify your clients about those transactions. And we actually learned about a year ago, we used to tell the clients the number of transactions that they needed to respond to. Like, hey, you've got 17 transactions that need your attention. And it turned out that was a useful checklist for the accountant, just to know volume-wise sort of what they were in for. The client was not motivated by a long list, though. In fact, quite the opposite. However, the client is very motivated by their cash. And so telling them, hey, you've got $5,600 of uncategorized transactions, it's like, ooh, that's my money. I better go tell you what that's all about. And so anyway, small little behavioral response hack there. We send them the magic link, which we already talked about. That's been a game changer. And then the clients can add descriptions and attachments, which are typically receipts or some other supporting documentation. They can also, if you want to, Uncat's very customizable. So if you want the client to provide a class or a customer or a vendor, or even to categorize the transactions themselves, you can give them the power to do that. And then it will all roll up to you so you can review it. And obviously all the answers sync into QuickBooks. So you can categorize and do everything and sync it all to QuickBooks. It's just $5 per client file per month. I should put client file, not just client. So you can have as many client users as you want with Uncat. You can have as many colleagues in your firm as you want, as many transactions as you want. We just bill on a monthly basis, $5 per client file, which makes it really easy for small bookkeeping and accounting firms as well as the bigs to either absorb that, which is to say include it in value pricing, or to pass it on to the client, and it's not a big lift for the client to pay an additional $5 a month. So that's what we're seeing. Quick response for you, Virginia. I can show this probably in a screen share in a little bit too. But yes, you can also use Uncat to get information back from clients, even if the transactions have been properly categorized. So let's say you're very happy with how things are categorized. However, you really need to get class information back from the client, or you need to fill in any transactions that are missing a vendor. You can do exactly that. So we have a setting inside client settings for any particular client that you want to do this for. And you can say, hey, sync in every transaction during this time span that's missing a vendor or a receipt or a customer or a class, et cetera. And then you can get that information back from the client. So yeah, that's another popular use case.
Yeah, I think we share a lot of similar traits in that it's like a turn it on and it just works. So you don't need to be super technical to set it up and make it go like a lot of other things that might be out there, and fairly inexpensive. So very, very affordable. And like you, I hear a lot of our partners in some cases not passing the cost on because it really just covers them. They're buying it to save themselves time more than anything. And in some cases they do pass on the cost and it's just part of the package they offer. Okay. Beetlejuice, who I tried to convince my kids that's what we should dress up as this year. They have no idea who that is. So it's obviously aged me. But love Beetlejuice. Let's see it live. So we're going to jump into a couple of solution walkthroughs. Igor, I'm going to pass it over to you. And I'm going to have you just take us through the rewind system. And then we're going to come back to Brandon. And he's just going to give us a quick peek at Uncat. So let me just do that. We'll pause here for a moment.
Okay, perfect. So this is the rewind portal, or the vault, as I like to call it. What you see here is a long list of all the various types of items that are in your QuickBooks account, right? So there've been a couple of questions so far on in the Q&A about how this differs from the backup solution that's available with QBO Advanced. Now, first things first, obviously, if you don't have QBO Advanced, it's far more cost effective to add Rewind than to upgrade your client to that tier. As for the other differences, what it really comes down to is the way in which we back up data, right? You're going to see at the top here, next scheduled backup, last backup, and yes, there is a backup that happens around midnight. The key difference is with Rewind, that's not when each of the backups occurs. They're actually going on all the time. You can see here, right? I was playing around, added Brandon, threw in a purchase, and you can see these were only 3 minutes apart, right? So I was not running backups. I added these items in QuickBooks, and shortly thereafter, they were automatically backed up, right? So these backups are happening all the time, and you have the ability to pick and choose the items you want to restore, right? Now, before I jump into that, I'm actually going to switch over to the advanced restore, because, as much as it's wonderful to be able to pick and choose, often when you're coming to use Rewind, the situation is that the books are in complete disarray, right? Something's happened. An app got added and there's 1,000 new invoices all of a sudden in there. You just want to get rid of them. You want to get back to a clean state. And so this is where there's a few things to do to prepare your books, and I'm not going to go into all of those details as they're very specific, but essentially what I could do is I could pick today, and I could choose the time in which the issue happened, right? So let's say, 10:15, let's say, 10:30 this morning, I put the app in, and then everything went crazy. And so I want to roll everything back to how it was at 10:15. And this is where, the key difference between the advanced version and what Rewind offers is, with Advanced, you'd have to go back to yesterday. You would lose everything that you did this morning, right? With Rewind, you can just go back a little bit, right? And so this will delete items. Oh, wonderful. Signed me out. This will delete items that were created since that time. Anything that has been deleted is going to be brought back, and the things that have changed are going to be changed back to what they were, right? And so this is how your file, your client's file, you're going to undo all of the undesired changes that have occurred, right? Now, the advanced restore, that's the disaster recovery. The all items is the ability to pick and choose, right? Now, these are all added, or most of them are added, but updated means that there's multiple versions, right? So on February 3rd, right, this customer was created, and then on September 22nd, they were updated, which means we have two versions. So it's as simple as saying, yep, I want to go back and I want to restore back to the original version. Now, this list for many of you is going to be much longer than two versions. Obviously a demo account, so far less going on in here, right? But the key is that as data is added to your account, Rewind automatically picks it up, automatically creates all of those new versions, and that's all happening in the background. You don't have to come in and run a backup at any time. A lot of these features are here because we also back up other apps, and that's how they work. With QBO, the backups are constantly running, so you don't ever have to come in and do that. And then the other piece to add would be that, this is one of your accounts. Obviously, like I said, we back up other things, but, here is another customer, let's say, right? And so each of your customers, while they're all in this one vault, each of them has its own backups, and those backups will only ever restore back to the same account that they came from, right? That's it.
Perfect. Now, before you wrap up, in 30 seconds or less, because I want to make sure Brandon has a chance to show us Uncat, you mentioned a use case recently, which I hadn't thought of, which people were using the QuickBooks system to train up new employees.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. Yes, I had a call with a current customer. We were talking about some of the new things that were coming, and they told me that one of their favorite ways to use Rewind is that, new hires, they don't want to let them touch a set of books until they know that they know what they're doing. And so they had they called it a set of training books, right? Which and there was a whole set of instructions of here are all the things that happened. Go and create those, do all of that in this QuickBooks account. And then they go check to see if they did everything correctly. In the end, they would then just use our advanced restore feature and roll that training set of books to exactly how it was before the training started, allowing them to use it for the next person rather than having to go and create a whole new set of books just for that training purpose. And so, yeah, I thought that was a great example, and I appreciate you reminding me about that, Scott.
Yeah, that's an expert level move. I hadn't even thought of that. So that's interesting. So save time restoring, but also save time training and onboarding. I like it. All right. Why don't we, if we could, I'll have you just flip it over to Brandon. And Brandon, why don't you take us away and show us a bit of Uncat, and then we'll do some Q&A.
Yeah, appreciate it. Great demo, Igor. And yeah, for any of us, and I suspect it's all of us at this point that have had a data loss experience, then being able to literally rewind time and get stuff back is a very relieving concept. Because I've lost, at one point last year, I think 6 dozen or so completed, finished, produced videos. And when they were gone, they were gone. And I was really surprised. This was a provider and they didn't have a backup. And I didn't have one either because it was hosted in their cloud. And so it's just gone. And that's terrible. It's a lot of hours, right? So imagine a full QuickBooks file with a client's entire financial health and history wrapped up in that. It's super, super important. So great stuff. Yeah, let me show you around Uncat a little bit. Here we go. All right. This is our homepage, uncat.com, which is a coup to get that domain name. I was super excited to be able to get it because most 5-letter domain names have been taken long ago. But this is Uncat. This is, obviously, we're doing a short demo right now. If you want a longer demo, you can book a demo with me here. Get started free. You can launch a free trial. Goes for 2 weeks. Try it out with as many clients as you want. And you can add other folks in your firm. I always say the best way to try software is to try software. That's especially true for kind of time-saving utility apps like an Uncat, like a Rewind. It's not, big enterprise software that takes 3 weeks of training and a 500-page user manual. You can just kind of like plug it in and get started with it. And Uncat's that way. So you can literally be up and running. We've had folks on board, 50 of their clients in about a half an hour. It's not a big lift, super simple interface. So this is how you start a free trial. And then when you do so, you will account with Uncat. Let's say you use QuickBooks Online. You'll sign into QBO, and then you'll choose the first client file you want to connect, and you'll put in that client's email address. So give them a heads up first that the invite's coming, but once you put in their email, we'll send them an invite on your behalf that says, welcome to Uncat. Here are your uncategorized transactions that need your attention. And when they click that magic link, it'll take them straight into a dashboard that looks something like this. This is a demo environment, so I've branded it with a little jungle cat, and I've created a fictional jungle cat accounting firm and made it orange to match. So obviously your firm name will go at the top, your logo, your brand color. That way you get that nice marketing hit and your clients know they're in the right place. So this, for most clients, is going to look pretty familiar. They're going to say, oh, this is just like the Excel spreadsheet, the Google sheet, the email that I've been receiving with uncategorized transactions in the past. I know what to do here. We walk them through it if they really need it. Most clients just dismiss it and get right to work. This is where they type in a description. Why did this transaction happen? What was its purpose? And then beyond that, you can see the attachment paper clips. Here is where you can easily upload any type of file. So most of these are receipts, but if it's a deposit, it might be a PO or a contract or some other supporting documentation. This is the default view for most clients that use UNCAT, right? The accountant wants to capture a description and optionally receipt, and they're good to go. So when the client clicks save, their responses are going to sync into QuickBooks. So the description goes to the description field, the attachment goes to the attachments. It's going to disappear from their UNCAT dashboard because now their homework is complete. They can go back to building their company, and you'll get a daily digest notification. We don't want to swamp you with emails, but once a day, if you have clients that have made updates, you'll get a little email letting you know, hey, you've got 7 clients that updated 34 transactions, let's say. And you click in that email and it'll take you to your dashboard where you can then see which transactions did the client update. So here were the 4 that we just looked at on the client's dashboard. Here are the 2 that they already responded to. So they explained that this deposit was a customer purchase of 10 t-shirts. So they're in the t-shirt business. And here they bought a pretty big ticket receipt at Costco, 3 TVs for the new office edition. Things are going well. So based on these descriptions, you could then reasonably come in and categorize those transactions. So here we've synced in the chart of accounts for this client. You can choose the right account from this drop-down list. You can also do a quick type ahead, just like you can in QuickBooks. And if you want to, you can also assign other field values. So here I can assign a class. I can also come over here and expand this transaction and assign a customer, a location, tax, billable, etc. So you can make all the changes you need to make here at UNCAT, and then simply click save on the right, or the big orange save updates button at the bottom if you want to sync in more than one transaction row at a time. And all of it will instantly go into QuickBooks. And then you're done. Once you've categorized, that transaction will then disappear from your dashboard. You can do a bunch of other stuff here on the dashboard. I'll mostly just describe it versus show it in the interest of time, but you can click on any column header to sort the dashboard if you want to sort by amount or by account, etc. You can search transactions to just see, for example, a block of Amazon expenses or a block of Venmo deposits all at once. You can just sort of tick them off the list, which is helpful. You can also see multiple clients. So if I scroll down, here's client 2, here's client 3, etc. So we have firms use this with a handful of clients all the way up to hundreds of clients. And that way you've got kind of one pane of glass, if you will, to see all of your clients. When you're doing month-end close, you don't have to have 25 tabs open, one for each client, just to handle their uncategorized transactions. You can do them all from one dashboard in UNCAT. So you can go from client to client. You can also simply type ahead a client's name and jump straight to that client in UNCAT. You can also choose a transaction and come up here and split it. That's a pretty popular thing to do. You can split by category or by class. You can also select several transactions. This becomes a bulk menu, and you can apply the same class or the same location, etc., to multiple transactions at once. The other feature that we added this summer by popular demand was a requests tab. So a lot of firms said, look, my clients are reliably in UNCAT every week. I've got a few additional questions I want to ask them. They're not transaction related. I just want to ask for a W-9 for a vendor or a bank statement from last month, or I have some other question that I need to ask the client. Here's where you can ask a question, then you can require a response, an attachment, or both. So it's a convenient way, since the client's already coming into UNCAT, you need some information back. You don't necessarily want to inundate them with emails. You can just handle it straight through UNCAT. All right, cool. So let's jump into client settings for this client. UNCAT's customizable for each client. So this is where you choose which accounts from the chart of accounts you want to sync into UNCAT. So usual suspects are Ask My Accountant and uncategorized expense, income, assets. Sometimes people have Ask Client or Suspense. You can title the accounts anything you want, and you can click in this box to choose as few or as many as you want to sync into UNCAT. That way, whenever transactions hit those accounts, they come right over into UNCAT. The other key setting here that I'll mention for now is the sync start date. So Uncat syncs back automatically 3 months from the date that you connect it to our platform. If you need to go back further than that, you can absolutely do so. People use Uncat for cleanups all the time. They're cleaning up the previous year for tax season, or they have a new client that requires substantial past year cleanup. You can come in here, choose a date in the past. As you know, Uncat is just $5 a month per client. If you're going back in time with Uncat, it's just $5 per additional month, which is just a one-time charge. So that way, it's very cost-effective to do a cleanup for a full year or two without breaking the bank. Couple more settings I'll show you. This is the notification settings. You can choose how often this client will get notified about transactions. Like I say, weekly is the default. You got a couple other options, and you can choose the day of the week. If the client's used to hearing from you on a Thursday, for example, or you want to spend the first 3 days of the week processing and then notify them Thursday with hopes that they'll finish providing you with information later Thursday or Friday, you can choose the date accordingly. Dashboard settings is where you can customize Uncat, how it looks and feels for the client. So here is the default. Description is required. Attachments are optional. If you click this little client superpower switch, you can choose which fields should be visible to the client, which ones they can edit or update, if you will, and which ones are required. So in this example now, not only is the description required, but so is the customer. You might be requiring them to provide a customer for every transaction. Or we could even say, now we're going to require them to categorize every transaction. When they do, their selection will sync into QuickBooks, but it's also going to show up on your dashboard. So that if you need to correct any mistakes they made, you can always override what they did and sync it back into QuickBooks. And then lastly, on client settings are client users. Like I say, you can have as many client users as you want per client. This user is the main kind of client admin user for this client. This one's a coworker. So here we've assigned this coworker to only see uncategorized expenses that originated on their credit card. So you have control over, which is a really popular use case. If you've got a bunch of people out in the field, you can assign them to only see transactions that are from a specific credit card or from a specific bank account, or only specific uncategorized transactions. Let's say they're the AR manager. You only want them to see uncategorized deposits. You can do that. All right. Those are client users. Oh, I mentioned this in the chat in response to a question earlier. You can also add a cell phone number for any client user. That way, we'll not only send them an email notification, we'll also send them a text message. Extremely effective. So we all have clients that don't necessarily check or respond to email often. Maybe email is not required in their line of work, but every one of us is on our phone all the time. So sending a text message kind of cut through the clutter, get their attention. They can click the magic link. It'll pop open Uncat in their mobile web browser, and they can tap in descriptions and upload receipts from their camera roll. So about 20-25% of updates from clients typically come in through the phone. So that's a really popular use case. If I click settings at the top, that's just going to show me overall settings for my firm. So I've got 3 connected clients. I've got 1 coworker. So this would be a fellow accountant or bookkeeper. You can invite as many coworkers as you want and assign them to particular clients if you want to. And then, of course, this is where you can upload your logo, put in your firm name, and change the color of the app at the top and the bottom, essentially to match your brand. So that's a quick tour of Uncat. I'll show you as an example, if you're adding a client to QBO, it's basically a couple clicks, super fast and easy. The same is true for Xero since it's web-based. For QuickBooks Desktop, for those of you that may have clients on desktop, we just walk you through this process. Doesn't take long at all. It uses the free QuickBooks Web Connector that allows Uncat to live in there and sync data in the background to that file, whether it's open or not, which is super helpful. If you're using QuickBooks Desktop on your computer or hosted in your office or on a cloud provider, right, like a Right Networks, for example, is the largest in the space, we work with all of those. So to sort of answer or preempt that question, if you're in a cloud-hosted QuickBooks Desktop environment, Uncat will work for you. All right, I'll pause there in the interest of time and Q&A to see if there's any questions we need to answer.
Sure. Why don't you unshare your screen? I'll switch it back to our presentation, and we'll go into... Perfect. Yeah, we'll go into what questions we might have with the few minutes we have left. Now, if we don't get to your question, don't worry. We'll be happy to follow up with you directly through email or what have you. So if we don't get to your question, don't worry. I see there are a few. Let's see. All right. So just before we do get to those questions, I'll leave this up on the screen while we go through questions. But each of us, both Rewind and Uncat, of course, have trials available if you want to give either of these a shot. With Rewind, you can go to rewind.com/no-vampires for this particular webinar. And there is a code to use if you decide to sign up, which of course we love, which was no-vampires23. Feel free to take a picture of that with your phone, but we'll of course be sending this out in an email. So don't worry too much. It will come with you. So yeah, that's valid between October 25th until November 25th if you choose to use that.
On the Uncat side, yeah, like I mentioned before in the quick demo, there's a free trial, or if you want a longer demo, definitely give me a shout. Happy to talk through your use cases. There's always most clients get set up super easily, but every once in a while there's a special Snowflake client that needs some extra attention, or a special setup, or you've got some questions about how it works, and I'm happy to answer those. We've seen most of those questions, I think, already, but every once in a while a new one comes up. So let me know if I can help. And come visit us. Our next conference is QuickBooks Connect, which is in 3 weeks or so in Las Vegas. So swing by. You'll look for a big cat, and that's where I'll be standing. I'm also 6'8", so I stand out. So come by, get some cat swag, and say hello.
I want some cat swag.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, fair enough. And something that it's actually not listed here is many of our QuickBooks contacts are starting to use things like MailChimp to market their firms. Some of the smaller firms especially are starting to kind of move into more automated marketing. If you're looking at that, we've also actually released MailChimp, but it is a free version right now. So you can actually back up your MailChimp customer list and contact list for free. So feel free to visit rewind.com and check that out too. It's just an early access. Okay, so we only have a couple more minutes. Let's just kind of grab a couple questions. I see Igor for the Rewind side. You've been super on the ball about answering most of them, which is fantastic. I appreciate that a lot. And Brandon, I think you've got a lot of yours too. I see one here. Let me just read it. I'm migrating from QuickBooks Desktop to online. What point should I install Rewind to ensure I have good backups in place? Good question. Okay, so the advice we usually give is we'd probably have you install Rewind like day one. So the day you get access to QuickBooks Online in the cloud, put Rewind on there, and that way any data that filters into there at any point is now backed up, so you're good. So you don't have a gap between whatever you're doing on your desktop, your USB key, etc., and the new cloud space. So we would say probably put it on day one and you're good from that point on. Brandon, did you see any that we missed for you?
I typed in some questions, so hopefully that answered those ones. If anyone has any additional ones, happy to answer them, obviously. But yeah, thanks everybody for chatting in with questions, and hopefully you got the answers that you needed, but certainly it's easy to follow up. So I can put in the Q&A, but it's easy to remember. On our website, there's a little chat also that'll come to me. Otherwise, my email is just brandon@uncat.com. So if you think of a question right after the webinar ends, just give me a shout.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'm going to switch our slide over to exactly that. You can reach us, of course. You can reach out to Melissa, who's sitting here. Hi, Melissa. At melissa.schaefer@rewind.io, and she will be very happy to field your questions or push them on to Igor or one of us to answer for you. So, of course, we're always here to answer questions, and we love to do it. I think we're two, so I'll probably call it there. There's a couple of outstanding questions, but I'll be more than happy to have us follow up after the fact. So, Brandon, Igor, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was a solid webinar, and I love the Halloween theme. I think we should do more themed webinars. I'm convinced.
Yeah, we got to choose like all the holidays, right? I mean, we should just have a drumbeat of webinars with you guys. We had so much fun. So yeah, thanks, sir.
That's a great idea.
The opportunity.
I love it. I'm going to need new decorations though. I gotta go dig into the basement.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone who stuck with us for the full hour. I think actually everybody started with us for the full hour. So that's amazing. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. I hope you learned something interesting today. But as Brandon said, if you have any questions, don't be shy. Please do reach out. We're more than happy to help. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you again real soon. Goodbye from Uncat and Rewind.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, bye now.